And I want to welcome to the stage at this time, Jeffrey Slentz. Jeffrey is a senior engineer here at Algolia. Hey, Jeffrey.
Hey Chuck, nice to be
Hey,
here.
glad to have you. And I wanted to just have a quick conversation with you about Hacker News and about the search we built and sort of the future of it. But first, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's nice to be here. I'm Jeffrey Slentz. I'm a senior solutions engineer. Today I thought we'd have a chat about Hacker News and kind of the work we've been doing with it. I've been with Algolia for about 2 years and kind of started working on this project about 6 or 7 months ago.
Right on, right on. And we're glad that you took it on. We were definitely having some challenges, but maybe, I would imagine this is a very developer focused audience. So hopefully folks know about Hacker News and Y Combinator, who of course sponsor Hacker News. But why don't you tell us a little bit about it just to kind of get us level set?
Yeah, definitely. So if you aren't familiar with Y Combinator and Hacker News, Algolia was actually a startup that started in Y Combinator in 2014. We were part of their winter class, and we noticed that they didn't have a search feature on their Hacker News website. And so Hacker News is just one website Y Combinator maintains. If you're not familiar, I'll show you in a second. But it just has a lot of stories. I think of it as like a subreddit, even though it was, you know, going up at the same time as Reddit.
Right on. Cool. And what does Hacker News have to do with any of this stuff?
Well, so the way that Hacker News shows its information, right, is it's separated into these the different. I mean, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Hacker News, but you can't actually search through it. So what we did was we had a search bar here, and when you make a search, it actually takes you to a domain that we maintain to power search. There's a couple things that I want to show you here, right? You can search by stories, any sort of filter here, and you can also search by popularity or date. One little pro tip, if you're not familiar, you can actually set the default date range. It's set to forever right now. You could set it to 2 weeks or last month. That way you have more up-to-date news when you go to search.
Cool. And so, I can't help but notice the URL does actually change there when you switch between the Hacker News site and the search. Is this part of Hacker News, or is this, a completely separate piece, or how does it kind of work?
Yeah, it's a completely separate piece. And so we maintain the domain, the web server, and we also maintain the crawler that's responsible for iterating through the new Hacker News stories and comments, as well as any updates people make to their comments.
Got it. Got it. But this is sanctioned by Y Combinator, though, right? This is kind of the official search.
Yeah, we're the official search partner. And so really this is a way to make anything on Hacker News that's been posted over its long history searchable and findable. And it's our kind of, gift or partnership back to the community.
Okay, I got to drill in on that though. So anything on Hacker News searchable. So how many items are we talking about? Like how big is
Yeah, yeah. So we index everything that's posted there, including comments, stories. If you post polls or jobs, they're all indexed and they're maintained in an index. And there's about 35 million items in there. And typically, when you search on Hacker News, you can try it yourself. But we return average. Our average response time is in the 9 millisecond range.
Right on. 5 million items. Love it. Um, cool. And so, obviously I can see we've built kind of a nice UI here. It matches Hacker News really well. If you didn't look at the URL, you might not have realized you're bopping back and forth between two different sites. They kind of work together cleanly. But again, this is a developer audience. Do I have to go through this website to get access to kind of like if I wanted to keep track, say, of mentions of Algolia on Hacker News, would I have to come to the site each time?
Well, you could certainly scrape it, but we actually post an API that lets you query Algolia, including the index itself, as
Mhm.
well as grab any item you want. And I just want to be quite clear, there's two APIs, one that's maintained by Hacker News, that's documented on their GitHub page here. That includes access to the, max item that they have in their Firebase instance, and there's an API that we maintain. You can find it here at the bottom of the hn.algolia site, here under API documentation. This
Yep.
includes things like access to the items, access to grab users, as well as search by any item.
Cool. Awesome. And so just kind of for my mental reasoning on this. So like if I wanted to go and sort of retrieve all of today's posts on Hacker News, I might use the Hacker News API. But again, like if I just wanted to monitor for posts that mention myself, Chuck Meyer, or Algolia or something like that, then I might want to use the search API instead.
Yeah, exactly. So let's look at a quick example. If I scroll down here to the search endpoint, this is a wrapper on top of the index. So if we do a search here, I've just made a search for OpenAI, and I could ping this repeatedly and watch for new stories. I could apply a sort. I could apply a filter for a certain time range. So that way I don't have to do it manually.
Cool. Awesome. I'm typing a little bit because I realized that our Q&A is filling up, but I'm having trouble kind of keeping track of if the questions are for this session or the session before. But someone did ask, so we host that second API.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
got it.
correct.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I think that was one of the questions. All right, well, let's get back on track here. So the reason that we're doing this conversation now, even though we created this thing several years ago, is we've done a pretty big refresh on it. You specifically have done a pretty big refresh on this, right?
Yeah, so one thing that we noticed over the years, this site has been running for 10 years, basically, almost 10 years, probably 9. One thing that happens over time is that your data might drift. So what we notice is that old comments, they may have been updated, but they weren't updated in our index. So there was an inconsistency in data that we were running into. So as part of this refresh, we decided to rewrite the application. I didn't make this decision, but I did pick up the project. It was originally written in Ruby, which is what our website and our dashboard runs on. Very powerful, but the expertise that we had in it had kind of moved on. So we decided to rewrite in Python, and now we have a Flask server and a web crawler written in Python to iterate over those changes.
Got it. Got it. And nothing against Ruby. Our dashboard's actually written in Ruby. We still have a lot of Ruby folks. It's just they're kind of focused on other projects now.
Yeah, so the main thing we fixed was the inconsistency, but it was also an opportunity for us to make a few tweaks to the front end. For example, we added more filter types, but really we're not looking to do massive overhauls at this moment, just maintain what's already working really well.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so where that kind of talks a little bit about the front end on the back end, what were kind of the reasons for the rewrite?
Yeah, so one of the things that we ran into, this inconsistency issue, was actually because we maintained a database that we indexed from. So since we had a database, we kind of had two sources of truth. One was Hacker News and one was our own internal database. And really they were modeling the same thing.
Mm.
So we asked the question, why do we even need this database? We ended up deleting it. So now instead we grab new items from the Hacker News endpoint. We have a cloud compute instance in GCP that basically pings the API every 15 seconds or so to grab any new items or any updated items, do some transformations, and push them into Algolia.
That's cool. I think that's a really important point, right? Is that when you are doing indexing, it's critical to understand where your source of truth is. And particularly, I think when your source of truth changes quickly, get as close to that as possible, right? And I thought that was a really interesting design choice, was like realizing that really your source of truth is the Hacker News API, and that the database was essentially just building an extra layer for no good reason.
Yeah, so we actually we ended up rewriting some of the endpoints because they were going and querying our database. And actually, a lot of the API endpoints that we support actually sped up because we went directly to the index instead of
Huh.
going through a slow into database transformation.
That's interesting. That's interesting. You're leveraging the fact that those APIs are very well tuned.
Yeah, for example, I can show you um, this query here. This is one of our endpoints for a specific item. You'll notice that it's grabbing all of the children comments. This is something the Hacker News API doesn't give you. It just gives you the children IDs, but we
Mhm.
actually expand it recursively. So one of this operation sped up between, it was taking 1 to 3 seconds, which is not very long, but it got down to 200 to 500 milliseconds.
Right on. And so the indexing piece, what is it running on? Is this running on, is it serverless? Is it containers? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the architecture. There's basically two pieces in GCP that we leverage. One is a cloud compute instance. It's just a single compute server that's running a single Python process that um, every 15 seconds it goes and grabs any new updates or items. The other instance we're running is a GCP Cloud Run instance to serve the Docker container for Flask, and that's so that we can horizontally scale without much thought or effort about it.
Got it. Cool. We've had a few questions. I'm going to ask them as we go here. Someone was asking, are we using multi-region or any sort of scaling to be able to reach the 9 millisecond average?
Yeah, so this the index that we're running actually has what we call our distributed search network, and we have instances in Europe for sure, USA, and I think there may be an Asiatic instance. But yeah, we basically have multiple replicated indices so that you can query the closest one.
Got it. And that was from Daniel. I should credit folks for their questions. Um, Another question is from Marianne, and I'm not sure if this one we can address or not. But what is the type of search used in the Hacker News website? Is it linear search or what type of search is it?
So it uses the core tie-breaking algorithm that Algolia
Mm,
uses. Anything, if you made your own Algolia index today, it's the same exact algorithm, but we of course use like tree structures underneath the hood. I won't go into too much detail, but it's not exactly a linear search. We do some typo tolerance, any sort of feature you can think of that's in our documentation.
right on. And then we've got a couple anonymous questions too. The first one, with the huge size of the data, is it possible to go through all the relative items within one search? So I guess kind of a browse almost.
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is no. Because we're a search engine, any engine has to deal with the trade-offs you make uh, between speed and like indexing time. So when you do that, you have to make some sacrifices with the exhaustivity of your data set. So since that's the case, there's a pagination limit that we have. It's probably set to 1,000 items. If you wanted to iterate sequentially, you could do that with grabbing the individual IDs and sort of like filtering for a range. And you can do that in an iterative fashion. So you can exhaustively browse the entire data set through the API if you'd like. It may be faster actually than the Hacker News endpoint. At one point, there's a quick story. We were trying to do a full reindex to fix the data inconsistency issues that we were talking about. And the Hacker News API only allows you to retrieve one item at a time.
Mm.
So a single threaded, single HTTP request at a time process was going to take about 4 to 5 months to do all 35 million, 36 million items. So of course you multi-thread that, you make it asynchronous, and even with that change, we were able to get it down to about 2 weeks, which is a long time for a full reindex. So what we ended up doing was putting this into GCP on their cloud job architecture,
Mm.
splitting up the workload across multiple VMs. That way we can have 10 requests going in VM1, 10 requests going in VM2, split it up that way. That way we can do a full 35 million item reindex in about 24 hours or so.
Wow, right on. That's definitely a an exponential increase in efficiency there for sure. Um, cool. So I guess the next question is what's next for this? Like, do we consider this to be the V2 fully complete, or are there other things that we want to do?
So at this point in time, we think that Hacker News, the search is feature complete, and it has been for a while. So we're not looking to make huge changes. There are a couple things that we'd be interested in exploring, and I'd be curious to hear if anyone has any feedback about these. But one, for example, is the popularity across all time. That's kind of the default experience, but usually people are interested in recent events, right? We would
Mm.
love to keep popularity across all time as a historical tool, but what my theory is that most people are interested in some sort of recency metric, whether we use like a time decay algorithm or something like that. I'd be really interested to explore that. The other thing I'm interested in exploring is utilizing Algolia's neural search, basically transforming some of the stories into vectors as well, so we can match more across the semantic meaning of queries.
And that's an interesting problem too, right? Because you want to talk about exponential exponential problems, right? Going from a single keyword hash to like a vector hash. That
Hmm.
starts to get a lot more complex. That'll be really interesting to see. I would love to see a neural interface for this too. Wow. Or like a generative bot that, has the entire corpus of Hacker News as its training. That could be really something to see.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd love to see if someone could make a generative AI or a augmented generation for search. You could use our search API right now and put it into the context feed of a bot. I'd be curious if it's useful.
yeah, right on. Okay, and I got one more question here in the Q&A. How can someone contribute? So if this is an open source project, what can they do?
Yeah, great question. So we maintain a GitHub repository here called hn-search. I do want to put a quick disclaimer on this. We rewrote the Python in our own private GitHub repository, and our intention is to move this to the Python rewrite into the public repository. So at this moment, when you're looking at this repository, it's Ruby code, but the code that's actually powering the website is Python. And I realize this is an inconsistency, so we want to move this to be transparent. Um, if you do want to contribute, you can make an issue for now, and then soon we'll have the Python code there for you to take a look at, and you could contribute there as well.
Right on. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and maybe put the link for that repo here at the bottom so you can see. And yeah, definitely go ahead and check it out. Again, you can put an issue on there now, like if there's something that you think you wish we could do, or if you have some thoughts about what we could do with the ranking, particularly. It seems like that's a place where we could really kind of do some tweaking, and be looking for that new source code soon. So very excited to see that. This is like I said, like I think the funniest thing about this whole project was as Jeffrey was doing the rewrite, I think we had like a CI/CD hiccup or something, and the search went away for a little bit. And it was just amazing the response we got on Hacker News. I don't think we at Algolia even realized how utilized that search was. So really glad that this is something that we can do for the community, and kind of give you another way to sort of engage with a place that has just become such a wonderful place for devs to have good conversations, and sometimes maybe a little angry conversations, but that's okay. That's okay. Well, Jeffrey, I got one more question for you. What's your word?
So my word is secret.
Secret. All right. So we've got our second word for the URL. Well, I appreciate you sharing this with us today, Jeffrey. And it was good to talk with you. And I hope you have a good holiday.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Thanks for having me.